Okay, guys. Well, thank you for being here so early and in such numbers. And in the true nature of keeping OffensiveCon offensive, we're going to start out with a defensive talk. So, what are you signing up to today? Well, we're going to do introductions, which are probably not needed for half of the speakers here. Then we're going to do some classic face palms and finger pointing, because everyone likes that. Then we're asking a bit, what if we do it right for once? Then someone has to hold my beer. Then I'm going to tell you who is actually using or going to use what we're talking about. And then that's it, basically. Q&A, probably. So, introductions. There's FX, who's somewhat known, I think, for doing offensive and defensive InfoSec. And I'm here mostly being offended, so don't mind me. So, the usual problem that we have, or if you're going into the field looking at actual networks in companies, is that what they think they have is a big fortress. But if you take a closer look and once you're inside the network, that's what you actually find. So lateral movement is not that hard. And setting up signs that say, well, please don't enter here, that's just not working. So basically, with IoT, we have the obvious thing happening that your intranet is your extranet. Now, for Felix' part, in the past, we had certain tools that Felix did.
I have a mic.
Ooh, fancy.
Does it work? Yeah. I have a certain history of having written terrible code that did a good job in penetrations generally. So one of the early tools was FOSS, our Finolit's own password sniffer, which supported all kinds of protocols. Some of them I still speak. Go on. Yeah. Then people started employing switched networks, and passwords happened to no longer fly past a certain system, which I back in the day solved with RPOC, which basically is an ARP interceptor. And then many things turned into TLS, where back in the day it was called SSL.
Yeah, so the arms race has been going on for a while, and now we also have TLS in intranets, and basically it's going somewhat down the right track, but. So, how do we actually get trust back into our systems? As in, not I trust the system because I have to, because otherwise I would be fucked, but actual, how can I trust the system for a certain thing? What we do need, of course, is some kind of asymmetric crypto. That usually helps. But if you want to deploy that in any non-trivial setup, you need PKI. And now comes the fun part. PKI usually is designed for happy path. Who remembers that one? It only takes one expired certificate to have all your plugins in Firefox no longer work, which is a bit of a bummer if you're using JavaScript blockers, for instance, or the Tor browser. But luckily, they had a backdoor. So you could use the studies interface to roll out a new intermediate certificate to get it all working again. Nice, I guess.
Did they ever publish anything about who has access to those keys?
Someone probably. Yeah.
Who in the room has access to those keys?
No one willing to say. Yeah, the point is, with what we're about to show you, you would not have needed to use a backdoor to deploy an update to an intermediary. Then more recently, our friends at Microsoft had a single certificate expire. So Teams didn't work. So it took a bit of a slack. 20 million users affected. That's a serious number. But yeah, brought to you by a company that actually does monitoring for something like that. So even if your PKI works, you're using that X509 thing usually, and that is a bit coarse. So in the end, it comes down to either having a valid certificate or not. But the levels of distinction between a valid certificate and not are a bit coarse. It is a distributed system, but as soon as you want to revoke anything, it falls back to being centralized. You need an OCSP or a CRL, and that is named in the certificate, fixed, and, well, what is the first thing you DDoS if you want to attack someone using certificates? Yeah, that's it. The other thing is the Let's Encrypt problem, which you stumble over if you have a website that has a certain name that is similar to another certain name that is not yet registered, and you're using Let's Encrypt certificates. So someone else just signs up for the new domain that sounds somewhat like you, clones your website, and gets a certificate that looks basically for a human exactly like what you have on the other website. Yeah, nice.
Think the terms porn and prawn.
Yeah. So, but if we do it right for once, what do we need? We need some kind of bouncer in our flat networks. So there was that thing called ISO 2828, which is a mouthful, but I'll leave the short explainer what that is to Felix.
So 2828 was developed by the automotive industry of the world. They realized that having specific certificates in different parts of the car in order to verify who can control the engine or whatever is a pain in the butt because the car doesn't have permanent internet access, and hence the certificate authority things, the big service centers in the United States wouldn't be the right thing to ask. And then they came up with this idea of, well, how do we do that peer-to-peer?
Yeah, so we're at peer-to-peer. So there's only a very short step to making this a web of trust, which every one of you should probably know from PGP, though in our opinion, they're doing it the wrong way around. If you pair that again with a system that has very fine granular control to express what you want to do over a certain trust relationship, say policy languages, which have been around for a while and have the nice feature of allowing you to mathematically prove that they are doing the right thing no matter what web of trust relationship you're looking at. And for actual proof of concept to make your network safer, you need one more little thingy, the concept of port knocking. Felix.
Before it was called port knocking by the copycats, I actually invented that. It was basically the idea of certain traffic patterns you can observe on a receiving host, and that opens a port. I won a PacketStorm shirt for that from the PacketStorm guys because that was the first code I ever submitted to PacketStorm. And it works. So basically the idea has been around for quite a while. I think I wrote it in 2001, something.
So that should date Felix quite well. So now it's time for the part where you hold my beer, because quite a while ago we came up with a thing that we simply dubbed trusted routing, which is to the point but a bit simple. So now I forgot my damn prop. Hold on a second. Is it cocaine? No. It looks like cocaine. He's lying.
Try it.
Try it. Might be a bit spicy up the nose. So, look at your network. Your network is flat. No comments. We add some bump on the wire nodes. Bump on the wire is simple. You just have network in, network out, and it does something in between. If you look at it, I think I have a mouse here. You have the bad untrusted side and the good internal trusted side. And now stuff happens. Say node A wants to communicate with node C. So they simply send a packet out, not knowing that there's a bump on the wire in the network. Well, the packet then gets queued on the trust router A. And that one simply looks at the packet and says, well, this packet was supposed to go to C. I'll just send my own packet to C, but I use my own address as the origin. And that is the port knocking part. So it's a special magic packet that you send around, and you're sending it out in hopes of it reaching another trusted routing node. If that happens, that node captures the packet and directly answers to the origin address. So now we have transparently found two nodes on the network, or they have found each other, and they can do a cryptographic handshake.
For the network engineering people among you, that's basically how fast path routing works, right? Yeah.
So as part of that cryptographic handshake, you can also pass along some trust information from your web of trust that says, well, technically I'm allowed to pass along information over the wire that I'm monitoring, and I'm trusted with communication from A to C. And if the partner on the other end, trust router C, agrees with that, they can simply set up a firewall rule and let that pass. Then trust router A gets an OK, and they set up a firewall rule and release the queued packet. So.
And here you have your fast path.
Yeah. Now, how would you do that? The quick recipe is the prop. We implemented this on a Raspberry Pi. It's stupid. And we also learned that Raspberry Pi 2, at least, is stupid if it comes to the network stack. Horrible, horrible stuff. Firewalls use IP tables. The queuing, yeah, use NFQ if you're using IP tables. Scouting, some magic packet, simple. And then, how to delegate trust? You use what we're going to show you. What Peki is developing for a few years now. Quick caveat, you're paying with an initial delay here, which should be obvious if you followed the slides. The first packet is going to be slow on the probably order of a second or two, but we can do better. So we can do a quicker solution by being more trusting, which is nice. We let stuff through and then verify after the fact and deny what's untrusted, which is okay for some cases.
But not, think of SQL Slammer, right? If you would do that and the exploit is in a single packet, then yeah, you have been fucked already.
Yeah. You can do it better in a different way. Because, well, it's usually a local flat network, everyone knows each other, there's a peer-to-peer network between the routing nodes. You know the trust relationships, so you can parse them up front and create your dynamic firewall rules based on those, and then proactively create the rules. So that's quick. You could also set it up from a global view, do on-demand inquiries to check whether your trust changed, and, well, even add in topology knowledge if you have it. The initial slides that I showed you were the stupid system that knows nothing. But now you're asking, okay, that is a stupid example. It's just software-defined networking and making firewalls more complicated. But what is Peki actually bringing to the table here? The thing called trust policies that I mentioned earlier. Here, a trust policy is used to define allowed communication patterns, which is a firewall rule, if you look at it, squint your eyes, but we can express a lot more than that. We can express values, value ranges, value structures, We can delegate access to IP range blocks, geolocations, whatever you can express mathematically within the realm of the rules of the trust policy languages, you can do, and do so mathematically proven in a semantic-free way, which makes parsing nice and makes it future compatible, because you can have a policy language that allows you to add terms while it's deployed without having to change your software. So how would such a policy look like? This would be a long string, so I broke it up into several rows. We could say something like, well, the protocol this is affecting is UDP. The destination ports should be somewhere in that range. Packets appear from this local IP range, and they usually end up at one address. You can then add more stuff, make it protocol aware, say, well, they're talking DNP3, whatever you want to do. And the nice part is that once you have such an expression, you can do delegation in whole or in part. Say, if you're trusted with this IP block, you can delegate subsets of it. So you can say, well, I'm trusted with the /24. I can then tell someone else that they can actually handle on my behalf anything that is the same base, but a /25. That will work. Actually, I can delegate whatever I want. But if I'm only trusted with the 24, that's the only thing that would be effective, because that's ensured by the mathematical principle of the policy language.
Think of a CEO who delegates financial operations to the CFO.
Yeah. What we can now actually do is, for the first time, build a system that has proper federated trust. It's easy. You can do a distributed system, and you can do a decentralized system, because let's come to the key differences. What the PECI Web of Trust authorization delegation system does is you're delegating at the edge instead of the center of your system. So you can do that at arbitrary precision. You're no longer saying, well, you have a valid certificate from a certain CA, you are a developer, a user, whatever. No, you get authorized for very specific operations in a very specific time frame, possibly limited to certain locations. You can even do funky stuff like multiple parallel path thingies, where you delegate half of what you need to one party, the other half to another party, and then do funky N of M trust, where they have to come together, create a new identity, delegate all they have to that new identity, and that identity can then launch nuclear missiles. Oh, shit, we got offensive. What everyone is doing actually to prove that something is true is a synthetic quoted delegation proof. What you would usually call a certificate, but which is kind of not. It's basically, in the human terminology of trust, saying, well, that guy said, that this guy said, that I'm allowed to do this here. That's how it works. We're also no longer using stuff like explicit revocation, because that's how we got a centralized system out of X509. Instead, every node participating in this trust network has one single truth, the latest thing they said. And that is something everyone else can verify. Because if I'm saying, well, I trust Felix for something, and I change my mind and say, well, I'm trusting him for something else or not anymore, and I publish that, and someone gets both my utterances and says, well, you said this at one time and this at the other, they can still verify that one is newer than the other, which...
Think of politicians on the news.
Which brings us back to the Firefox problem. Because if I can just change my mind, and in that case, the intermediary would change their mind and say, well, we extend the validity of this certificate. All you need to do is transport that updated ground truth of that single node to everyone, and the transport way of getting it to someone can be fully untrusted. We don't care. Because in the end, when you get some information, you can say, well, I've seen information from that source, so signature seems right, but I only have something that's older. Yeah, okay, let's throw away the older one and integrate a new one. So you do not need to use study systems backdoors. And that brings us to the last part. We are fully transport agnostic. So the way to exchange information, we couldn't care less. It could be store and forward networking. Where are we currently on the tech stack? So I've been talking about a solution. So you can think of it as something that lives on the same level technology-wise as X509. You can use it to build your own PKI. You can directly build it into your IoT systems because, well, we've been building that in Rust and just recently got to the point where it compiles with no STD, so we can target ESP32, which is nice. But yeah, the title said, look what you will be up against soon. The usual question I get at this point is, well, cool story, bro, but who's using it? So, with one of our partners, we're going to do offline device bootstrap, which means it's basically the proper way of onboarding your vacuum robot at home. Because usually you open a Wi-Fi hotspot on that device, connect with your mobile phone, and then the device, well, basically trusts you because it's principle of first use, which is okay for a home vacuum robot, but not if you're deploying thousands of IoT devices in a corporate environment. Because there you might want to verify that A, from the point of view of the device, the guy or gal currently configuring me is actually authorized to do that. And from the point of the person doing a configuration, you might want to verify that this is one of your 1,000 devices that you ordered and not the 1,001st device that is a plant. And you need to do that in a fully offline environment because, well, that device just opened a hotspot for you and you're connecting to it. So you need to do all the proofing between each other to convince each other that what is happening right now is okay without being able to consult any third party at that point. With another partner, we're looking into bringing this into smart home building control. So you can actually delegate access to your front door without having to onboard people with your smart home system directly. So imagine yourself on the beach in the Caribbean, and a friend calls you up and says, well, I'm in Berlin next week, can I crash at your couch? And you're like, cool story, but I'm in the Caribbean. You can simply send them an email, even if they don't have access to their smart home system, because, well, currently you have, but so does everyone running your smart home system. You don't want to do that. You can delegate the permission to them and send them an email with the delegation, and they can take this information to your door and present it. Basically tell the door, well, we've never seen each other, but your owner told me it's okay to open this, and the door is like, yeah, cool, okay, that works.
If you have that deployed, you have a smart ass home.
Yeah, we're also working with a payment processor, doing user permissions and access control. Midterm plan is to actually have a bank running on delegated web of trust. And long term, my wish is fixing PSD with version 3, because imagine you have a bank account and a tax consultant, and instead of having to go to your bank and onboarding your tax consultant so they can look at whatever you booked on your bank account for the last year to do your tax returns, you simply tell the tax accountant, well, look at this account number for the duration of last year, but please only read, no executions, no bookings, whatever. Just read what's in there. And you tell that to your tax consultant in a signed structure, and the tax consultant then goes to the bank and says, well, I don't have an account here, but I have permission to access one. And the bank can simply approve that without having to talk to me, which is nice. And it speeds up things a lot.
You should probably spell out PSD so people don't think of files from Adobe Photoshop.
Yeah, it's the Payment Service Directive. And PSD2 is that nice thing that I think legalized Sofortüberweisung, which is a whole different thing. Anyway, we're also a member of the MCC, which is the Maritime Connectivity Platform Consortium, which is a mouthful. And we're currently looking into enabling decentralized PKI for international shipping. We're also partnering with several companies on the SCADA and ICS front to finally get critical infrastructure a bit more trusting, including legacy support, which is not quite unlike what I presented earlier. With another partner, we're currently developing a proof of concept for highly resilient field communications based on LoRaWAN and classic RF communications. And last but not least, we're currently in the process of tying all that to FIDO2, which is interesting because if you're a German citizen or soon a European citizen, the German ID card is actually a FIDO2 token. So you would have a, well, system where you can do delegations and contracts based on a state ID, which is actually what you want if you're digitizing your state, no longer going to the offices, dreaming. So that's it, basically technology-wise, and we're very good on time. What did you see? You saw a system that allows fully offline authorization. It's not authentication, though that is a step of it. It is a decentralized web of trust in the truest sense. You don't need any central infrastructure. You can use it if you want. You can delegate and express delegations at arbitrary precision, which is a bit more than predefined levels in X509. You can delegate these expressions in part or in full, and it's fully transport agnostic, so you can use a central database of peer-to-peer networks, store and forward networking, opportunistic communication, whatever you want. We showed you that an example of the trusted routing retrofit, and what you did not see was blockchain bullshit. So once that's in the field, our idea is to make revocation day look more like that and not like Pearl Harbor. So if you have any questions, now is the time. Thank you.
Maybe to anticipate one question, how is that relevant to people like you? Basically think of a network where you're breaking in and executing a input on one node, right? What we usually call exploitation. Now, this one node can actually tell other nodes that, look, there's strings coming that contain a bunch of A's and then a bunch of Unicode characters. If you see them, don't eat them. It's a bit like drug consumption on parties, right? So you get a pill and you walk to a friend and say, "Did you try that? Is it good?" And if he looks like that to you, then here you have your answer.
Yeah, the key point is that because you have arbitrary precision delegations between each node on your network, if you use that, they actually trust each other for exactly their job. So usually, if you have
exactly
a shop
their
floor,
core competence.
yeah, their core competence. If you have a shop floor where you have a big milling machine that is allowed to order replacements for broken mills from your SAP system, which is the nice thing that you're supposed to do nowadays with all automated, it looks a bit odd if that machine suddenly starts accessing Samba shares on your network, because that's not what it's trusted for. So that's exactly the point that we're trying to make. If you're very precise in expressing what is allowed over a certain communication channel, you have way more difficulty in doing lateral movement once you compromised one node, so the problem stays local. Any question? No. Don't be so defensive.
Did everyone fall asleep? There's no questions in the room?
That usually means we sucked.
I will also take offensive questions.
If their questions aren't offensive, I can try to fill in.
You just walked past it.
Be aware you might get an offensive answer.
Just one question. How powerful is this expression language for policies, and how, let's say, how complex are the parsers for that?
The parsers are susceptively simple, which was the whole point. It is a context-free language. It is, mathematically speaking, it is a lattice language. So you have very small elements for which you prove that the mathematical guarantees hold. And then you have structure elements for which you prove the same thing, and then you can arbitrarily stack them together because we have a proof for the operation of stacking stuff together. So even if you have a very complex policy, by the looks of it, the individual elements and the way you stack them together is fully mathematically proven, so that works. And on a parsing level, you're actually just looking at strings, and you're deciding, well, this expression is bigger than the other expression, and you're not attaching any semantics on the library level. The semantics is purely on application level by the programmer saying, well, if this operation is requested from me, this policy needs to be fulfilled, and this policy is nothing but a blob of a string. Does that answer your question? Well, we can delve in that later over a beer if you want.